What's up everyone, it's Sprometheus, and today I have the privilege of being one of the first people to try out Cometeer. Now, considering this is a coffee channel, you've guessed it, it's a coffee company. But they're not like a cafe or a roaster, they do something a little bit different. For lack of a better term, you could call them an instant coffee company, but I think they're even just a little more different than that. Essentially, Cometeer buys large batches of high-end specialty coffee roasted by some of the most popular roasters in the US, like George Howell, Counterculture, and Equator, just to name a few. Then they take that coffee, grind it, and then they brew it in their super secret squirrel proprietary extraction process into a concentrate. That concentrate is then dosed into these fully recyclable single-serve cups and finally flash frozen fresh off the brew to a minus 321 degrees Fahrenheit or minus 196 in Celsius to the rest of the world. So the claim is here, this whole process locks in freshness and flavor without the use of any preservatives. So needless to say, I was pretty intrigued by this, so I reached out, made a connection, and then a month later, this arrived on my doorstep. So in this video, I'm not only going to be tasting and making Cometeer coffee, but I'm also going to be comparing the little frozen puck to a fresh brew of the exact same coffee. But without any further fanfare, let's dive in. In this case, calling it making coffee doesn't really make a whole lot of sense because essentially all you need to do is melt it. If you want hot coffee, melt the capsule in some hot water. If you want cold coffee, melt the capsule and then pour it into cold water. If you want a latte, melt the capsule and pour it into milk. You get the idea, it's not rocket science, but I did do just a little bit of science in this video to try and find the ideal dilution to get a cup of this coffee to meet specialty coffee standards. Since I don't have access to their brew ratios or recipes, I had to go about it in a bit of a different way than I usually do, and this time I'm just looking at the TDS of the finished brew. To do this, all I needed was a little trial and error to find out how much water is needed to land the beverage in a TDS range of between 1.2 and 1.7. Their brewing directions recommended using between 6 to 8 ounces of water, so I tried and tested both. Using 6 ounces created an unpleasantly heavy brew, and that tested at 1.91 TDS. But the 8 ounce was right in the sweet spot at 1.42 TDS. After testing each of the coffees they sent me, which all range from different origins, roasters, and roast levels, they did seem pretty consistent across the board in terms of their TDS. If you use 6 ounces of water, you land around 2 on average, and if you use 8 ounces of water, you land around 1.5. To start off, I have to say that concentrates and I have a pretty rocky relationship. I've had a couple decent ones in the past, but more often than not, they're pretty unpleasant. But based solely on the coffees used by Cometeer, I know they understand specialty coffee and quality, so in my mind there was a bit of a tug of war of expectations. They were kind enough to send me a range of flavor and roast profiles to get the full experience. And as advertised, each coffee does provide the taste experience you'd expect. To a point. The light roasted Ethiopian from Equator, for example, carries flavors of black tea and stone fruit, and an overall familiar African profile. The Birch and George Howell coffees also carried through their own cup profile with clear and distinct flavors. Overall, each coffee was enjoyable, very clean, and surprisingly complex. But in the end, I did find that each offering, regardless of roast level, had a distinct lack of acidity. Also, every coffee has the exact same mouthfeel, which I find odd, and it must be an after effect of freezing. It's not a bad mouthfeel, it's very smooth and clean, but I do kind of appreciate the differences in mouthfeel between coffees, and that's one of those things that I would miss. Now, some eagle-eyed viewers maybe have realized that I showed 4 different boxes of coffee in the beginning, and one of them has yet to make an appearance. Well, the reason I held one back is because I actually was able to snag a fresh roasted bag of the coffee used in this package of Cometeer, and the urge to put fresh versus frozen to the test was too strong to ignore. So I brewed up a fresh pour-over of the Counterculture Baroita, and then brewed up a Cometeer capsule of the same coffee to see how they compare. Between the two, it's very clear that they're the same coffee. Lots of the same notes and flavors were carried through, but like I noted earlier, the pour-over carried much more acidity and a different mouthfeel. But the pour-over was actually a bit more sour than the Cometeer, which leads to the benefit of Cometeer being so simple to prepare versus dialing in a new coffee brew by meticulous brew. Cometeer seems to occupy an unusual space in the coffee market. It's instant, but not really. And it's for people who drink craft coffee, but don't partake in the craft. For someone like me, it feels more like a novelty than a day-to-day routine. but they are a pretty solid deal at $2 per capsule, which is less or equal to what most cafes charge for a batch brew. They will hold up flavor-wise outside of the freezer for 24 hours and hold up for about 3 days in a refrigerator, so they aren't made for those long trips without a cooler. It's definitely on the higher end for instant if the line for instant coffee is just adding water. It tastes better than the other options like it, but it's definitely not a direct one-to-one replacement for a fresh brewed cup of coffee. In the end though, I don't see any downside into having a couple of these boxes in your freezer ready to go, for those days you just want a quick good cup of coffee, or you work in an office full of specialty coffee deniers. Anyway, that's all for me today. Don't forget to leave your thoughts on this video, Cometeer, and instant coffee in the comments down below, and of course, I'll see you next week. And of course, a big thank you to my February Patreons, Ads, Jacob P, David W, Christopher, Squeegee, Rowe, Brian, Lisa, Obo, Andre, Sean, Noel, Spookus, Mika, Samantha, Bound Coffee, Claire, Steven, James K, Josh, Andrew Horrison, Corey C. Curry, Jeff Roth, Joey N, Thomas B, UK Espresso, RD, Tim, Ninja Warrior Coffee, Home Barista Coach, Testing 123, Jason C, Jerry, Matt, Zachary V, Tyler F, Robert Underdunk, Jeffrey R, BJK Cafe, Chris M, Daniel P, Mike B, Brian M, Brandon B, Tyler M, Sebastian, Matthew C, JRC, Absolute, and Stephen G. And of course, a big thank you to the barista and barback tiers. If you want any information on my Patreon, there's a link in the description and in the upper right hand corner right now. And of course, thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Hit that little bell button for notifications of new videos posted every Friday. Follow my Instagram at Sprometheus for content throughout the week, my blog at Sprometheus.com, my coffee at littlegiant.coffee, and as always, stay caffeinated. Pony Boy.